and welcome to another reading vlog, the theme of which is of course popular 2023 releases, or at least highly anticipated, much hyped 2023 book releases. So I don't know about you, but I find that despite the fact that I am so fully enmeshed in the publishing and book worlds, and I get so excited about so many books and generally keep my eye on releases and genres I'd be interested in and have a sense of what's coming out from different publishers, I can then forget or put off reading those much anticipated books when they finally come out. Sometimes I've known they're coming out for well over a year and I buy them on the day they're released and then I don't get to them for another year. Maybe it's because of all that hype, maybe it's because I've put so much pressure on them, maybe it's because I'm seeing everybody else talk about them and I want to read them in a little bit of a freer headspace. I don't know, maybe there's no good reason at all, but it's certainly something I find myself doing, and I wanted to preemptively correct that in regard to a few books with this vlog and read some of the books that I have been super anticipating, that I've seen tons and tons of people talking about before release and since release, and that there's just been loads of reviews and loads of hype for, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Now there is a book that prompted this, and it is Yellowface. So Yellowface is a book I've been super eagerly anticipating. A bunch of my friends and people that I know and trust online have read it since it came out and loved it, and I have been so excited to read it. But I've noticed that even though I got it when it first came out, it's been a few weeks and I still haven't picked it up. My flatmates even read my copy, but I haven't, and I feel like if I let it go on long enough, I will leave it a really long time and I'll get to it 3 years late or something, and I won't be able to be part of the conversation, and all of that buzz will have died down. So I don't want that to happen because I'm really excited to read this book, and I thought I would use this as an opportunity to read Yellowface as well as some other books that perhaps fall into a similar category. Now the other two books I have in front of me came out earlier this year, so I've already let quite a few months go by, and there's nothing objectively wrong with that at all, but I just think it would be nice to kind of read some of those books that everybody's been talking about. The ones that either have those massive publicity budgets before they ever come out, or just take a hold of the sort of bookish zeitgeist once they are out and people really latch onto and everyone starts to talk about. So if you don't know, Yellowface is a contemporary novel about a woman who steals a manuscript from her recently deceased friend, I feel like friend is the wrong word there, or colleague from the publishing house she works in, and passes it off as her own. So she then goes on to sell, publish, publicise, etc. this novel that she didn't actually write under her name, and as a part of that ends up leaning into a sort of Asian catfishing scenario, because the protagonist of the novel is Asian. Our fake writer isn't Asian, but she lets people think she is in order to sell this book and make the experience seem more authentic. And I know from friends who have read it that do work in publishing that it highlights a lot of the existing problems that we're aware of in publishing. It explores obviously racism in the literary world, and I'm sure it's going to explore a ton more than that and going to be really intriguing. I haven't heard a bad thing, so really excited. This is going to be the first book I read for this vlog. But I do have two more books, both of which are fantasy, that I think might be interesting to give a shot in this video. Now the first one, Stolen Air by Holly Black, is one that I would consider a big release of 2023 because it is the beginning of a new series, which is a sequel series to the Cruel Prince series, or the Folk of Earth and Air. I forget what the actual series is called, but it begins with the Cruel Prince, which was a YA fantasy series that everyone was talking about when it came out. I read them as they were released. I really enjoyed them. I thought they were really compelling and escapist and fun, if dark. And when I heard that there was going to be another book following one of the younger characters from that series, now grown up, I thought, yes, I need to read that immediately, yet I haven't. And I think it'd be really interesting, given how much buzz there was about the original series, to sort of give this a shot finally. And then we also have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, which I don't know about anybody else, but for me this feels like one of the biggest fantasy releases of 2023 so far, or at least one of the ones I've heard the most about since it came out. I think it came out quite near the beginning of this year, and it just felt like everyone was talking about it. I was seeing press releases everywhere, I was seeing Instagram posts everywhere, I was seeing positive praising reviews everywhere, and had friends physically like recommend it to me in bookshops. So again, it's one that I just think there's been a lot of buzz around. It's been a big release of the year. It's obviously got a really beautiful hardback like all of these books, and I would like to see what I think of it. So for reference, this is actually about the character Emily Wilde, who I believe is compiling a encyclopedia of fairies in like a semi-pseudo-historical fantasy world. Don't know much more than that, to be perfectly honest. And then in this one, like I said, it is a sequel series to the Cruel Prince series, which is a novel set in like the kind of tumultuous court of the Fae. So these are the books that I think are already on my bookcases without buying any more, that have had some of the most buzz in 2023, that have been some of the biggest releases since they came out for me, and like I said, what's on my bookshelf. So there have been plenty of other books but that I have access to and would like to read in this vlog for you, and hopefully you'll enjoy coming along with me, hearing my thoughts as I read these big releases, and we can sort of dive deep inside them together. So yeah, starting with Yellowface, I think I'm going to crack on with my reading and take you along with me. My goodness, this book is so good. It is so uncomfortable, somewhat nauseating, but so good. Like, so readable, but in a really elegant way. I'm about 50 pages in and I haven't been able to put it down basically since I started. Like I mentioned, it's quite uncomfortable, and I think like the discomfort initially comes from the fact that it is narrated by the person doing the terrible thing, which is the stealing of the manuscript and passing it off as their own. So her unreliable narration and her bitterness throughout the narrative is very uncomfortable to like sit in, and it's very uncomfortable to read, and you just feel a little like, oh. But I also think it's so well done, like the way that she tries to justify her actions. And at the very beginning, there like is a moment when, before you hear about her relationship, Juniper's relationship with Athena. So Athena is the woman that dies and Juniper is the woman stealing the manuscript. When you first meet Juniper, she talks about the fact that her first book didn't do very well, that it was a massive slog to get published, and then the publishing house that originally picked it up went under before it even came out, and blah, 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 blah. And like, that sucks, right? That sucks. So there's like this brief moment of sympathy, and then by like page 5, like the sympathy is gone. The bitterness is like in full throttle. The way that she almost like places her own lack of success in her own eyes on the shoulders basically of her friend, I feel like friend is really the wrong word, is so well, it's very self-centered, and there's a lot of racism in the way that she frames it and the rhetoric that she uses about the fact that her friend is just diverse enough. And then later, when she's attending her friend's funeral, as you know, the friend dies, that's not a spoiler, the way she talks about her family, and she keeps trying to insist, I'm not racist, whilst being incredibly racist. But all of the justifications feel very realistic in terms of like things I've seen and heard and read about. Like, it's all very believable in a very uncomfortable way, as is all of the actions thus far of everybody in the publishing industry. And although they don't know that she's plagiarised this book, there's still some really uncomfortable things that are going on in terms of the way this book is being edited. Massive scenes being cut out, and exploration of certain aspects of the racism in the book, because the book is a exploration of Chinese soldiers' lives during World War One, so it's exploring like all of that. The way that stuff is cut out because the scene is like too gratuitous or too like unbelievable or too like one-dimensional, not complex enough, and we need some white characters that are good guys, and maybe there's a Chinese character that's a bad guy, and like, yeah, that stuff definitely happens. 100% can believe it, do believe it. Yet even the narrator admits that some of the stuff the original writer put into the book is taken verbatim from historical records. Like, it's not unbelievable. Just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unbelievable. And in a way, that's like a very meta representation of the book itself. And it's so good. It's so good, and I'm going to zoom through it. I have no doubt I'm going to finish this in 48 hours. So I am halfway through the book now. It's the same day. I'm just zooming through it. It is so compelling, and really, really compelling. It's the best word for it. Really engaging, and disturbing, like I mentioned before. So I see myself kind of just continuing to stream through it, and I thought for that reason, since I'm about halfway through, I'll give a quick update, in case I don't end up remembering to vlog again until I finish the book, because I could see that happening. I'm just so in it. But at this point in the narrative, the book is published. Again, not a spoiler to know the book is published. And I just like there's been so many moments in this book. There's been so many moments in this book that go beyond even the author's terrible actions. But it's not just her. It's like, obviously nobody else knows what she's done. This is like something she's done and she's passed off as her own work. Yet still, all of these people, not everybody, there are some people who attempt to be different, but so many people in the publishing industry, in other like parts of the media, continually do other awful stuff as a part of the publishing, editing, promoting, disseminating of this book, that are incredibly racist and privileged and awful. And it doesn't even need to be the fact that she stole this manuscript in the first place for those things to be there and to be awful, because every single thing that happens in this book is just something that happens. None of it is fantastical or super out there. Every single thing happens, and it is entirely believable. And it's just the fact that it's like, it doesn't matter if they're like, it does, I guess, oh god, I can't articulate myself, but like, it's just that fact that it's like, it doesn't matter that they're not complicit in her original theft. It's just like, even without that aspect, all of the other terrible things, and language and way people speak about the book and the representation and everything else, and yeah, it just sucks, because it's all there. Like, it's all there. It's all a part of the industry. And I think this is a really great book in terms of like kind of highlighting that, both to people within and outside of the industry, and just showing the problems and the hypocrisy of it all. So yeah, really compelling. Like I said, can't put it down, gonna keep reading. I can't believe how quickly I read this book. It has been such a long time since I have read a book in less than 24 hours. I know I said, oh, I'm going to read this in 48 hours. It's not even been 24. I devoured this book. It is so good. June, the protagonist, is like the ultimate unreliable narrator. This is like peak example of writing the unreliable narrator, as well as an excellent critique of the publishing world. I don't know what else I should really say about the plot, because I don't want to spoil it for you. I've probably said enough. I've said plenty in my previous clips based on stuff that like was already clear from the marketing, but this has actually got some real like twists and turns to it that you might not see coming. And like I said, peak unreliable narrator that just like really unravels and descends and so on and so forth as the book goes on. Like it's really well paced, and I think it, like I said, it's just very compelling and it has you very engaged, but it is very real and it does happen, and this is an excellent example of it. And the stuff that happens in this book isn't like, at least if you take like all of the things individually, are not things that are rare. Maybe like the exact events of this book all like stacked up aren't like something that happens every day, but like individually the things in this book are not rare. And it was great. It was really fantastic. I think one of the best books I've read this year, and it is one of the popular releases of the year for a reason. Like, what more can I say in this video? Like, yeah, there's probably a lot more in-depth, thoughtful reviews of this so far online. I'm just like reacting as I read it, and I was so impressed. So yeah, I am really excited to read more by this author, as like I mentioned, this was my first book. So at some point I will start one of the fantasy books I mentioned at the beginning of this video and share my thoughts on that with you too. So yeah, check in with you then. Apparently this is my new go-to spot for like immediate or first time updates on books. It's literally me sitting in my bed. But I started Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, as you may have seen in the previous clip, and I'm not like terribly far in at the moment, 20 odd pages or so, but I just thought I'd like give you my like immediate reactions to the prose and the world that's been built. So it seems to be set in a fictional Scandinavian country, but in a sort of like alternative version of our real world. So it's the early 1900s, and as far as I can tell, there are those who study dryadology in this world, which is the study of the fair folk. So not just in terms of like studying them in literature or in folklore, but like physically going out into the field and studying them, because they are verifiably like real, and they are. And we follow a woman who is a scholar and is on a field trip to study these fae. I'm having like major deja vu, but I haven't read this book, it just came out, but for some reason describing it to you is giving me super deja vu, so whatever. So she's off on this field trip to a fictional Scandinavian island to study them, and it's just so far very charming. Like, I'm getting cozy fantasy vibes. I think it's going to be kind of cozy fantasy vibes from the tone so far, and yeah, it's just quite charming in terms of the way it's written and the narrator's perspective, because she's writing this as if she's writing up her field notes and her everyday experiences, but also with some personal adages, and she's already discussed her rivalry with her colleague, who's also kind of her best friend, but she kind of like hates him because he's so good at his job. But also, even just from like the letter he sent her, it seems like he might fancy her, so I'm assuming that they might fall in love at some point during this book. don't know how that's going to pan out, but it's just, I don't know, yeah, charming, it's sweet, it's charming, it's a really nice world so far, although I've not met any of the actual fair folk characters, and I'm excited to read it actually. I think it's going to be nice to have a little cosy fantasy. Honestly, I have not been in the best mental headspace in recent weeks, to be honest. This is not a new thing, and I'm struggling to sort of not feel down most days. Like, I have a dip most days at the moment, and I think a little cosy fantasy might be exactly what the literary doctor ordered, a little bit of cosy fantastical escapism. So yeah, I'm excited to get stuck in. Reading update time. So I'm about halfway through, maybe a tiny bit under halfway through, but close enough, through Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I am really enjoying it. I can't believe how lucky I've been with this video or with this reading vlog. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised, because like, these are big popular books that I was really excited for and loads of people recommended and reviewed really highly, but like, even the most highly raved about books, right, don't always like work for you. So I'm very pleasantly surprised by how well this reading vlog is going in terms of my enjoyment. So yeah, I feel like I could end up with 2 5-star books at this rate, even though I haven't finished Emily Wilde yet, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, really enjoying it so far. I still feel like charming is the best way to describe it. It's like quite a cozy fantasy, and I like the blending of the academia side of things, but like a light academia, not like a dark academia vibes, mixed in with the like fair folk-esque fantasy world and world building. Like, I really like light academia fantasy. I think I'm realising I need more books that are light academia fantasy, so let me know if you have any recommendations. But those are overlapping genres and tropes that I really enjoy together. And it also has a bit of like a grumpy sunshine dynamic, which is a trope in romance, because like there seems to be an undercurrent of romantic tension throughout this book, but regardless, there's a grumpy sunshine dynamic between our main character and then her equivalent, I guess, at the university, so this other scholar that was driving her a little bit wild at the beginning. Emily Wilde being driven wild. Yeah, so there's like a grumpy sunshine dynamic, but she's the grumpy and he's the sunshine, and that's also something I really love, and I'm realising I really love in fantasy, is when you have a grumpy sunshine, and actually in just historical romance as well, it doesn't have to be fantasy, a grumpy sunshine dynamic where the man is the sunshine and the woman is the grumpy. Like, I think that's really nice. I really, really love that dynamic about the Blackthorn and Grimm series by Juliet Marillier, so that's what this is giving me somewhat. Not exactly the same, but like that vibe and that kind of, oh, cute feeling. But I also like the world building in terms of the fair folk lore, and I think that's just because it reminds me so much of the kind of like fair folk that I grew up with in fairy tales and legends as a kid, because I guess they're familiar to me. Like, I have like a real soft spot for this kind of like fairy folklore, and it really reminds me of what I grew up with in Scotland. Now obviously it's not set in Scotland, it is set in a fictional Scandinavian country, but there is overlap in terms of like folkloric tropes, shall we call them, between like Scotland, Britain, Ireland and Scandinavia, and just sort of, I guess, like Northern Europe in general. So I can kind of like see those elements there. It reminds me of what I grew up with. It reminds me of the kind of like fairy tale tropes that I've read a lot of in my life. And I even enjoy that part of the book is including fairy tales from these people. So one of the things that happened shortly before the halfway point was the protagonist wrote down some of the folklore and fairy tales that the inhabitants had narrated to her and shared them with us as the reader, which I really enjoyed. I don't know if the themes of those stories are going to play into the plotline at all, but I really like that. I don't know. It's just nice. I guess I've spent a lot of my life both reading and researching this kind of stuff, so I like when I see it in a fantasy world, and I like when I see someone experimenting with it and doing something interesting with it in a fiction setting. And yeah, I just wanted to update you on that. So yeah, really enjoying it. Going to carry on. And with that, another book is complete. And another book I loved. I am so pleased with how well my reading has gone this week. And it's been really nice that a classic reading vlog sort of in part inspired that and sort of pushed me to read some books that I ended up adoring. So I was happy to bring you along on that journey, and hopefully it's been fun to watch. This book remains utterly charming. The word remains the same. It did not disappoint in terms of maintaining that tone throughout. But I also adored the way in which the world building unravelled and the lore behind the magic and the fair folk unravelled as the book went along. I loved learning about this world, both from Emily Wilde's experiences and her like academic notes, and her interaction with the fair folk and their stories and the local people's stories, and then of course all of that being embedded within Emily's and perhaps should I say Wendell's larger story. They were fantastic duo, and I'm just so pleased I read this book, and it's the first in a series. Some fantasy books, absolutely, I prefer to be a standalone, but having now completed book one in this, I'm so glad it's going to be a series, and I'm going to get to read more about these characters and this world and see what Heather Fawcett does with them in further books. I think that's going to be really interesting to see what creative sort of twists and turns she takes. And I haven't, I think, fallen in love with a fantasy series in this kind of vein for quite some time in the way I have with this. So yeah, really lived up to the hype for me. Loved this one, as I did Yellowface. So all in all, this has been, like I said, one of the most successful reading vlogs I think I've filmed in a long time. I haven't adored two books consecutively as much as I have these two books. They are both probably 5-star reads for me. So yeah, that was really wonderful. As you can probably tell, I am going to end the vlog here. It's been about a week just over since I started filming, and that's usually when I like to kind of cut myself off from filming vlogs, because if I don't set a time limit then they will go on forever, and a week seems pretty good. Plus I've got a pretty busy new week ahead of me, so I don't know how quickly I'll read another like full-length novel. But I'm really pleased with how the week went. Hopefully you've enjoyed hearing my thoughts and it's been interesting. Maybe you've now been inspired to pick these books up. If you'd already read them, I'd love to chat about them with you too, because you know there's so many spoilery things I'd love to talk about that I couldn't mention in the video itself. But yeah, like we could discuss more down below. And I'd also love to hear about like the big 2023 releases that you sort of hyped up in your mind and have read, and how you felt about them, as well as the ones that you still want to get to before the year is out. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this vlog. Always happy for requests for new vlog themes as well. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone.